All right, students, welcome back to some ACT math. And even though the ACT is done, I've tried to purposely pick questions of things that you might be working on in your math class. Specifically this week, quadratics, which spans all the math classes. So if you were in Algebra 1, Algebra 2, Algebra 3, or even calculus, you would have seen quadratics during the year and possibly be tested on it at the end of the year. So a couple of things about a quadratic before we start letting you guys work some of these problems. So it's things in the form ax squared plus bx plus c equals 0. And a, b, and c are just numbers. And, sometimes it might say y equals ax squared plus bx plus c, but because what we're looking for, parabolas are those U-shaped looking things that might be upside down or right side up. We're looking for these two things right here when we say what are solutions. And so if you're on the x-axis, that means you haven't gone anywhere up or down. So that's why we get to set y equal to 0. And, sometimes you're going to have to factor it. Let's just take one because the second example is going to be where you have to factor it. So let's say if I said this problem, then I'll show you a little bit more about the first one. If it's not factored for you, you're going to have to factor it. And the way you do that is to take this value of c and think about, is there two numbers that I can multiply to get c, but can I take those same two numbers and add to get this b? And we can. We know that would be 2 and 3. Well, what happens if you can turn it, these mean the same thing. So if you can turn it into this factored form, then there's this theorem in algebra that says if you have two things that are being multiplied together, and don't get confused, A and B don't mean the same thing. It's just if I have two quantities being multiplied together and they equal 0, then one of them has to be 0, or the other one has to be 0, or possibly they're both 0. So that's the reason we want to get these things into factored forms, because then we could just set the parenthesis equal to 0, the separate parentheses equal to 0, and do just isolation to get them solved. So this would have solutions of -2 and -3. So, but if you look at number 9, they've already factored that one for you. So you kind of can skip all this. Hey, what two numbers multiply to give me this and add to give me this? But when you get to number 13, you'll have to do both. Now, before I pause for you to have a look, I want to look at number 13. 13 is not just asking you to find the two solutions. It's asking you to take those answers and then sum them up. So be real careful that you're always reading these questions where these quadratics are concerned. And if you notice, these are pretty low numbers in the queue of the questions, as they probably will be. Okay, so let me zoom in. And if the teachers will pause for a minute so they can work number 9. Okay, so hopefully you had a chance to figure out that one. We'll go through these answers in just a moment. Let me go ahead and scoot up for you to look at and try to answer number 13. Again, if teachers would pause for me. Okay, so let's go back to the first one first. Again, the first one is a little bit nicer because they have already got it into a factored form. Now, if this one wasn't in factored form, you can only use that two things that multiply to give me the last number and add to give me the middle number if you have a coefficient of 1 in front of the x squared. Well, this would have a coefficient of 6. So this one, unfortunately, if they didn't have it factored, you'd have to do some quadratic formula. All right, so here we go. Because it's factored, I know that either 2x plus 5 has to equal 0, or 3x minus 4 has to equal 0, or possibly both is going to be equal to 0. So I'm going to go ahead and just individually work these two separate equations by remembering that I want to isolate and solve for x. So we're going to subtract 5 first. The only thing left now to do is divide by 2. So one of my solutions is going to be -5/2. Well, if you notice, that's in two separate answers. So we have to keep going here. So because 4 is being subtracted, I want to do the opposite to get rid of it on the left. And then again, do your division. So the answer to that would be the other solution would be 4/3. So if you notice, that is going to be choice C. So again, just simply setting the two parentheses to 0 and solving the equation. Two equations. And a quadratic doesn't always have to have two answers. There is an example where they could only have one, or it could have complex numbers for the solutions. Okay, let me move my paper and let's look at number 13. So 13, because it does have a, no number here, which implies it's a 1. It's not factored for us, but we can think about how we can factor it. So I know it's going to have an X here and here, and that's why this works, because to get X squared, if I did the distributing of this, I have to have just single X's here and here to get X squared. Well, now I need to find out what number would go here and here. And again, it's two things that would multiply to give me -30, but add to give me +1. So to get a negative number, I'm going to need one negative and one positive. And when I say add here, it's technically going to work out to be subtraction. So I want you to think about it. Let's just think about some numbers. 10 and 3 multiply to give me 30. And we're going to need the bigger number to be positive. So if I have +10 and -3, that does multiply to give me 30, but it does not add. That adds to give me +7. So if I take 10 and -3, that's going to add to give me +7. So we can't use that. So you have to, sometimes you might think of the wrong numbers at first. And then if you do, just keep going. So I know other numbers that would multiply to give me 30 are 6 and 5. Well, if I make the larger number positive and the other number negative, look what happens. 6 times -5 is -30, but 6 plus a -5 or 6 minus 5 is +1. So I know that I could put those two numbers right here inside the parentheses. And if I did the distributing or FOIL of this, double distributing or FOIL, it would give me this top equation. Well, now I do just like I did for the first one, and I set these equal to 0, and then go ahead and do the solving of it. So on this case, we're going to just have to subtract 6 to get rid of it on the left. This case, we're going to have to add 5. So my answers or my solutions are -6 and +5. But remember, this problem did not just ask you the solutions. They said, what is the sum of the two solutions? Now, if you notice, -6 and 5 are two answers on here. So you really have to read carefully. So if I add up -6 and +5, I get -1. So again, another answer choice of C. Quadratics and solutions to quadratics. All right, guys, y'all have a great rest of your day, and good luck if you're taking your leap today.